Coaches, are you ready to revolutionize your game preparation? For the past 5 seasons, coaches across the nation have been using the ultimate scout team game changer, the Coachpad. Imagine this: no more scrambling on weekends to prep scout cards, no more fumbling with paper and binders. Whether you're drawing your cards digitally with a computer program or sketching them by hand, the Coachpad is your all in one solution. Picture yourself on the practice field effortlessly managing your scout team or standing on the sidelines during game day. Syncing adjustments from the press box to your coaches on the sideline and back. With the coach pad, you can clearly see your scout cards even in the brightest sunlight. No more squinting or dealing with the wind blowing clear vinyl sleeves everywhere. This offseason, take your coaching to the next level. Get your coach pad today at thecoachpad.com and gear up for a winning season ahead.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Downbacker podcast. Remember to hit like, share, subscribe so people can find the various episodes, including this one. Leave a comment, all that jazz, YouTube algorithm crap so YouTube allows you to actually see these videos. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad, as you kind of saw in the intro. Today we have the defensive coordinator at Seton Hill University, Africa 3535 finalists for assistant coach of the year, Coach Kevin May. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
Doing good. Did I get everything right? Finalist, Africa 35 out of
Yeah,
35.
it's irrelevant. I coach football. The rest of the stuff is our players should get all that.
Hey, you've done well enough that you got some recognition, so it's good to use it. How did you end up at the DC at Seton? Because I mean, you guys have had some quite a bit of success defensively since you've been there. So how did you kind of end up as a DC there?
Yeah, so our head coach here is Dan Day, and he got hired in 2019, and that was my first opportunity with him. We had no relationship prior, but my best friend Greg Holsworth had worked for him previously at St. Joseph's College, and when Coach Day got the job, he was looking for a D coordinator, and he actually asked Greg, and Greg was already at Henderson State in a good spot and wasn't interested at the spot, but passed my name along. And if you know Greg and Coach Day, they value good people. So for them both to, kind of talk about me in a positive light, it made him interested. And then we got on the phone and just clicked really about culture and more than anything else. And then he went against a flex years past in his as an offensive coordinator. So he kind of knew the problems it brought, which was a benefit to me in the hiring process. And then we just kind of clicked. So I ended up leaving Texas A&M Kingsville to come to Seton Hill, which I knew nothing about, and I didn't know much about him, but opportunity to be a defensive coordinator for him, and really haven't looked back since.
I mean, let's talk about that. Like, you've talked a little bit about it on other podcasts and other things, and I think some people know about. For viewers who don't, what is your flex defense? Kind of what is it based around? Like, where did that kind of all come from?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different like origins, and I've heard different stories too. And then we talked, before we started about, Tom Landry and his version of the flex. And there's a lot of, versions that I've heard are out there that I've never really studied or really know if they're that similar to us. But the way I learned it, so David Brown ran this for a long time. He and I worked together at Wyoming. He was a safeties coach there, and I was the defensive graduate assistant with the linebackers. And I really learned it from him. And he kind of told me the origin as Rich Ellerson was coaching in the Canadian Football League, and their D line had to be a yard off the field, off the ball. That was their rules in the CFL. So they were a yard off the ball. And then when he came back to the States, he went to Hawaii and worked for Dick Tomey, and he kind of brought that concept, like, can we flex at least our three techniques? Can we flex them off the ball and have a little bit more depth and some of the stuff that came with that? And that kind of evolved to, okay, can we just stand that guy up and make it more of a linebacker that could blitz, he could drop, he's more of a hybrid than just a D lineman. And so the flex, at least in my mind, is that flex three technique position. So like for us, we're double flex, double eagle, some people say, but we have two of those flex three techniques. So I think a lot of flex guys, at least in my tree, we have similar coverages and pressures and a lot of similarities. But I think when you talk about what is the flex, I think up front, it's kind of that five-man front with the two flex linebackers flexed off the ball, and that kind of free hitter at 6 yards. We call it our mic. Some people call it a safety, but that to me is kind of the flex in a nutshell. And we've morphed it quite a bit, but like our day one install nuts and bolts stems from what I know as the flex defense.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. Like we'd set this up, and then just ironically, like kind of told you like something that came across my YouTube suggestions about Coach Landry and his variation of the 4-3 flex, and I'm like, oh, I was like, that's hilarious. I watched it because I'm just a history buff in general, but I just thought that was funny. I mean, kind of what does your day one install look like? Like, what are the basics of it? Because again, you kind of mentioned there's variations of people who run the flex and this and that, and but for you, particularly at Seton, like, what is your like day one? This is how we're going to line up before we get exotic with it.
Yeah. So our day one, our front, we call it dog, but it's irrelevant. Our day one fronts, we're going to have essentially a 5-man front, right? We're a field and boundary team, so we'll have a field side and boundary side, even with our line up front. But we're going to have two defensive ends, and we call them air sevens, but they're really wide fives. Like if it's open formation, no tight end in the game, they playbook wise, they're 2 yards of width. They'll tighten down based on tilt and all that, but they're 2 yards of width. They're in 2-point stances, almost like outside backers. And then we have our nose. So our nose is somewhere from 2 eye to 2 eye based on the call we're doing. So like base day one, our first front, he's going to be shaded to the back. Almost, he'll be anywhere between a 1 and a 0 based on his ability. Like the bigger he is, the tighter they're going to be. The more athletic they are, they could loosen up a little bit. And then we have our two flex linebackers, and they're going to be, we tell them when the ball is snapped, we want them at the heel line of the D line, which is about a yard and a half off the ball, but it's easier to say heel line of the D line. And then their horizontal alignment, their inside foot is going to be right in the middle of the B gap. So they're in staggered stances with their inside foot up. And we say when the ball is snapped because our advantage versus an offensive line is those guys are linebacker body types for us. So they're quicker, faster, more agile, where O lineman is bigger and stronger. So science tells me if I'm going to win that battle, I need momentum. So we back them up and we call it gallop steps. We kind of get them a little galloping in them some momentum. But our base day one coverage, we call it one plug coverage. Those flex linebackers are blitzing their B gaps and their key and their guards. And the flex linebacker to the back, he has the tailback man to man. And what allows that to do is back end, we're a one high structure. So we cover down on people, we have our free safety, and then we have our Mike whose toes are at 6. And one, by having a 5-man front, we could teach the Mike, you don't have a gap. Like, yes, you could look on paper and say, hey, that front side A gap's open, but we just teach him clear or cloudy. So he's not a weight on the toes, downhill guy. He's a lateral, inside out, tracking the back and just seeing clear or cloudy. So coverage wise, because we cover the back with our flex linebacker, our Mike is free. So he's basically a zone player in our man system. So we call it a hole player, and he's not an aggressive run fitter. So he's not going to be pulled out of there for RPO or any of that stuff. So by having him and our free safety, basically both as zone defenders, we could play outside leverage man, which is way easier to play with lesser athletes than inside leverage man. So we're still divider based. We'll play inside leverage if we get wide splits, but we're going to play outside leverage man. And if you watch our film, we want you to think we're man, which we are, but we'll pass off unders. We're not going to get meshed to death. We're not going to get drive concepts. Like we're going to pass off immediate unders and change our whole players and all that type of stuff. But that's our day one base front, base coverage. And then usually at this point, I've been here long enough where day one will also have like a 2-man stunt. And then we put in our strong zone pressure coverage and our weak zone pressure coverage. So we're going to bring 5, bring someone from the field and play 2 trap with a strong rotation, or we'll bring someone from the boundary, we'll bring 5, play 2 trap with a weak rotation. So that's kind of our day one install. And then we evolve to kind of more stuff we've morphed to. But day one, we're going to have dog one plug, a run stunt, and then a strong and weak zone pressure.
Okay. I mean, I'll come back to how we've evolved it a little bit because I want to hit on that personnel a little bit more. Like, what are you personnel wise, position by position? What are you kind of looking for? Like, because as a high school coach, I try to approach everything like how is stuff applicable to high school coaches. I think that's probably a majority of my offers. I know I have college guys that watch my stuff and whatever, but majority of our audience is high school coaches. So like personnel wise, what are you looking for kind of out of especially that those the box players?
Yeah. So everyone has their wish list, right? Like everyone wants the taller, longer, athletic, weight, hip, knee benders, all that stuff is great. But especially the high school level, like you can't handpick who you want. You can't give people money. Like you have who you have and you have to morph it. I think that's one of the greatest advantages of the flex defense is you're playing on edges. So you don't need real long guys that need a two gap. Like you need a good nose, like your nose. It's like baseball. You have to be good up the middle. So you need a good nose, a good mic, and a good free safety. And everyone else can kind of fit in. Like, yeah, we want great pass rushers at the end, but we really just need guys that could set an edge with a lot of width and, pass rush, win some one-on-ones. But you're going to play on edges. And in a five-man front, you get so much one-on-one, big-on-big protection that you're not going to get comboed and doubled. Your flex linebackers like Dave Brown used to joke, that's the last stop before the bus stop. So if you can't play flex linebacker for us, you probably just can't play football for us, period. Like you could find a way in there. And as coaches, like the better our guys are, the more we could ask them to do. We had a flex linebacker 2 years ago, Jalen McDuffie from Maryland. He was a defensive player of our entire conference. So we put a little bit more on his plate to make plays to get him featured, but you could hide those guys as well. So the flexes, I think of them as like your traditional like 4-3 Mike backer, like your downhill plugger that he's not going to be able to really run sideline to sideline, but he's a tackle to tackle guy. He's physical enough to take on half a man and take on linemen, athletic enough to survive in coverage, but not going to be asked to do a whole lot of stuff. And then your nose, again, like the year after Jalen, we had our nose with the defensive player of the year as a nose. So we did a lot with him to get him. He was really athletic, but in our base, our nose cannot let the center climb. So he needs to be a physical guy that can get hands on the center. But he's the only one you need that's big and stout. So just like us, a lot of high schools are thin at interior D line. It's hard to find, three techniques and guys that could rotate and play, but most everyone could find those linebacker bodies. And linebacker bodies can play DNs for us. There's not a huge disparity between our DNs and our flexes. It's kind of like X's on a board. And even DBs, man, like people say, oh, I'm too scared to play that much man. If you play outside leverage with a whole player, that is way easier to play than even playing zone. We talked about, the being athletic enough to play cover three stuff. Like that to me is scarier playing zone and having to tackle people in space when you don't have athletes than, playing as tight as you can with a lot of help playing man. So, and you can use your free safety however you want to help whoever you need to. But up front, we look for guys that have knee bend and could strike and could put their face on people. But, we put people on edges enough where we don't have height weight requirements. We don't say, oh, you can't play for us because you're 6 feet. Like, we don't have to play in that world. So we could recruit some kids that don't get other looks because other coaches check a box. He ain't tall enough. He can't play for us. Well, come play for us and go make some plays.
Now with that, like you've kind of mentioned how yours is a little bit different from the Rich Ellerson tree aspect, the Dave Brown. But like I mean, since what was it, 18, 19, you've been at Seton. I mean, how has it evolved over these past 5, 6, 7 years for you, at least there at Seton?
It's evolved a lot. Like, so our first season here was 2019, and we took over a program that was in bad shape. Like they were 1-21 for 2 years before we got. So we knew it was going to be a rebuild. So our first year, we really just wanted to get the foundation of the system. So we were very, very vanilla. And really, to be honest, that's probably like what we were capable of running at that time with the guys we had. And even for me, like that is what I knew as the flex defense. So now in my brain, it seems simple, but that's all that's what the flex was before we evolved it. So we ran nuts and bolts. Our day one install now was like our whole season worth that year. Like get the kids comfortable, get them understanding the base. We're not going to win a bunch of games, but let's get our kids with the foundation. And then COVID happened. So when COVID happened, I'm a football junkie, man. So I'm like, I don't have access. I have more access now, but I didn't have access to any film I wanted to see. I couldn't just get on there and watch George. I couldn't do that. So I had YouTube TV and I could record any game on TV. So I would record, and the TV copies are hard to watch, but I would just watch any game I could and I'd record on my phone, like third down stunts or whatever. I just kind of built this thing. And I came out of COVID just knowing a lot more offensive football too, because that time so many clinics were available. You could watch all kinds of stuff. It was all accessible. Some were free, some weren't. But I just cranked out clinics. I talked ball. We set up Zooms. I learned so much more about pass protection, run schemes, how to manipulate rules. And then I kind of took a little bit from different people. And I feel like I'm doing a disservice because I can't say, oh, I watched Bob at this school. I took this from him. I don't even remember. I just took so much stuff from different people and pieced it together. And our D-line coach, Coach Figner, who's elite, he's been with me the whole time. And we've just kind of like, okay, well, this is awesome. Does it fit us? Yes or no? If it does, what can we call it? So like even Dave Brown and the flex guys, if they looked at our playbook and our menu, they wouldn't recognize three-quarters of the terminology because we just kind of made it up and built it ourselves. So day one install is very much the roots of the flex. After that, it's very much bastardized to different people's systems and how it morphs into what we do. More stunt and front wise than coverage. We're still pretty simple coverage wise, but it's really morphed into we just do a lot more fronts and techniques and movements and disguises and different looks than what I learned it from.
You kind of mentioned it there, and it's kind of easy segue. Like, I mean, you've mentioned you're a heavy man and one high team, and then you mentioned two trap in there. Like, what all? I mean, I don't need every single coverage, but like generally, like, what is your kind of coverage tree or portfolio kind of look like on a given year?
Yeah, so I think some context is important because we did the studies after the year, and I think we were roughly 75% version of man this year, right? Some version of man was about 75%. But for context, we were in 8 one-score games this year. Like we never really had a 2 or 3 score lead. Like every play we needed to stop the run. Every score was close all year. So every game to us was like a 3 yard run was important to stop. So I think that skewed some numbers where we were always in close games and had to play tight defense. But we were a heavy man. And then again, like I said, our next version is a two trap, which I think you could hide pre-snap, but also has way different weaknesses than one high man. So you could catch people in it. We do a little bit of like landmark country cover three. Like we could drop 8, we could drop 7, we could drop 6. I'm a huge believer because we play so much man and our two trap stuff is so like matchy, we're so tight. When we have a chance to play like true zones, I want to be landmarked and not match. I don't want to look at routes because that's our opportunity to see the quarterback, watch him settle, watch him throw, and see all those cue, and we can get picks and get eyes on. So heavy man, whether it's peel, one plug, versions of man, two trap, and then we'll do some Tampa two, especially third and long. We'll do some Tampa two, some country cover three, and then we have some man varieties too, where we have like 3 underneath players and just get some more help for mesh and that type of stuff. We did a little bit of. I know Dan Beard's been on here with you. We did a little bit of like 3 high stuff, just more as second and long, or if we have a lead type situation, we don't major in that for run fits, but heavy man and really a few change ups. And my reasoning with that is like you take quarters, for example. Quarters is a freaking investment, man. Like motion, formations, like now you're spending your whole indie doing formation motion review and not getting your kids fundamentally better. I want our kids on the back end to play fundamentally sound and invest their time in techniques and let us do the chaos up front and accelerate the throws for you and get the ball out. But I want our kids to be comfortable and good at what they're doing, not have to know a motion adjustment in the 15 different coverages we run. That's just not who we are.
Okay. Now, kind of segueing that, you mentioned practice in Indy there. How would you say y'all's practices are different than say somebody who runs a 3-4, 4-2-5, 3-3 stack, whatever it is? Like, how is there anything really different, or like how you break up kids or drills or anything from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference comes in the crossover with our offense. We're a huge circuit team, and I know a lot of teams that even run other systems are circuit teams, so I don't think that makes us different, but we do a lot because we play on edges, whether I'm a flex, an end, a rover, like everyone's going to run similar techniques. So we do a lot of circuits. So the coaches that are best at teaching block destruction, blitz pass, whatever, are teaching all the kids. So there's a lot of fundamentals. Of course, we do takeaway circuits and block all the typical circuits, tackling, but we do a lot of fundamental circuits because a lot of people in our system do the same things across the board. Again, I don't know that that's unique. I think the biggest difference is going against our offense. We are so different than most defenses. So we don't always help them, especially in season, for them to see our fronts and our coverages and the things that we do. That really, I think, is an advantage to us. They don't want to necessarily see that for the rules of their O linemen. I think it could become confusing. So we do a lot more like our good on good with our offense is like pod work. It's half line, it's one-on-ones. It's less 11 on 11 big picture, and it's more, pod work fundamental. So I think that's where we're most different is how can we give our offense a look that they want to see that doesn't really break all the rules, but how can we still play fast? That's really our discussion. Our head coach is an offensive guy. He's freaking awesome. Like he's as defensive minded as an offensive guy could be. But he's an O-line guy, so there's times where they just don't want to see what we're doing because it doesn't really help them. And I get it. I mean, that's fair. So we try to accommodate the best we can.
No, perfect, coach. Now, I mean, really, two more main questions before we go is kind of I'm always curious at the high school college level, like what is defensively, what does y'all's pregame look like when you hit the field for your defense?
Yeah, so we're really at the mercy of what our head coach wants in terms of timing. So for us, our pregame routine is pretty simple. Like some guys will always come out on their own. Like our D end is he has won 1,000 pass rush moves on the goalpost. Man, like he is undefeated against the goalpost using wiper. So he's out. That we know we're gonna have kids that wanna our D ends that never drop are out there dropping, catching pass. Like they have their own routines. Pregame will never stop them. But what's organized with us, like we come out in waves. So like the specialists, snappers, all that stuff, they come out first. And then our receivers, DBs come out and they just do the receivers kind of do pat and go, and the DBs just kind of, give them a press look and let them catch the ball, but just work on their man fundamentals. And we don't make our DBs come out for that, but a lot of times the receivers like it too, so they come out and do that. Then, the kind of groups come out in waves, and then we do full team stretch. Our strength coach running through stretch, and then we go back to Indy. So like we all have our little pods. I coach the linebacker, so that's Mikes and Rovers, our flex coach, our D line coach, our DBs coach, and we're just doing a couple quick tackles, a couple quick drops, just your typical, base movement patterns, just a condensed version of Indy, whatever that coach. I don't control that too much. I want our coaches to take control of whatever they want their kids to do pregame. Really, just getting your feet going and working on some movements and getting physical a little bit. Then we do 7-on-7, and every call for us is dog one plug. It's just base vanilla. Like we're not doing anything crazy. We go ones and twos. They rotate through. D line, O line do a quick whistle, one-on-ones, and then our whole team comes together. We run, 8 plays or whatever it is. We do a field goal and a punt, and then we head on into the locker room. And usually, selfishly, I'm watching the other team. Like I don't even pay attention to our guys until we get to Indy, and I got to run over there. I watch the other team and just see who's hurt, like, can I pick up on a cadence? Like, I'm just trying to study the opponent while they're out there and then I'll come back. So pregame to me is not really a huge emphasis. We just do a version of Indy, run a few plays to sit in our base, and then we get rolling.
Okay. And then my last question for you, like if they want to learn more about your stuff, like where all can they, like both social media, and then do you have clinics or on CoachTube or anywhere? Like what's the best way to kind of look up your stuff and get a hold of you?
Yeah, I do have the longest clinic I have is on CoachTube, and that's probably the most information out there. But I will say, like, reach out to me. Like what I can't stand is people that run a clinic and they say, "Hey, here's my email address, here's my cell phone number," and then they never get back to you. So like I take pride in that, man, because I've been there. I'm still there. Like I'm a football junkie. I'm still watching clinics and learning and taking things in. So if people reach out to me, I will make myself available. If they're willing to Zoom and they want to Zoom or come watch us practice, if they're close or whatever, like I'm willing to share film. I'm willing to talk some ball. I'm willing to, even this time of year, like I've got several people that I've Zoomed with that are asking questions and getting our film and stuff. So I think if you're going to look into a system like this, you have to be able to have a resource to ask questions about. Like you can't watch an hour clinic and say, I'm running the flex. Like it's going to be more of an investment. So I am available if people want to reach out, Twitter, email, or cell phone or whatever. It may not be that day, but I'll make myself available. Ask my wife; she hates it, but I'll make myself available to talk some ball and help in any way I can.
Okay. Coaches, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad. Give Coach a follow on social media platforms, including X, Twitter, whatever you call it. Check out stuff. Again, you can Google his name, YouTube his name, and CoachTube his name, and you'll find some stuff. Make sure you check that out. Otherwise, that's another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.